And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at a game called Meeple War. Yes, the word Meeple has now made it into titles of games. But this game is actually a supposedly prequel to Carcassonne, where the different meeples, where different villages are attacking each other with these giant mechanized creatures called meeples. It is a fighting style game, building style game. Fighting is kind of a loose term for this. It is a fighting game, but there's no dice in combat. It's kind of a, I kill some of your meeples, you kill some of mine. You'll see in just a second. But I did want to say that this game is from Blue Cocker Games, which they've done Medieval Academy, which I really enjoyed, and I also enjoyed their latest party game. So I had high hopes for it. I heard from other people it was good. Wanted to check it out for myself. Okay, so here is the game board as set up for 4 players. It's slightly different with 3 players. There's a single building in the middle that's worth victory points. Each player has their own building area where you're going to be able to construct up to 3 more buildings. And there's an entrance. This is where your little dudes are going to run on the board. Each player has a depot, and they're going to start with 2 meeples in that depot. And they're going to be getting these meeples on the board and moving around. There's also a Valor track over here where you'll keep track of your Valor. But most importantly is this triangle right here. This is victory points. As you get victory points, you're going to be placing meeples on this spot. When you completely fill it up, you win. Now, there's different ways to get points. One of those ways is when you destroy an enemy building. Anytime you attack an enemy building with one of your troops, you put one of your troops in that building. And maybe, let's say, the orange and blue attack this building and blow it up. Then this building is gone out of the game for good, and orange and blue each get 1 permanent victory point on their respective cards. Also here, the Valor track. Whenever you kill an opponent's meeple, as the attacker, you move up 1 on here. When you kill them as a defender, you move up 1 for every 2 that you've killed. So attacking is better than defending. Once you reach 7, then you're going to recycle back down here to 0, and you take one of your unused meeples and you get a point. Also, if you have 2 or more meeples controlling one of these spots in the middle of the board, those are worth 1 victory point. So you can get 6 victory points in your turn. You win if multiple people do it. The first person to do it is the winner of the game. Now each player starts with a village square piece out here, and it starts with a worker on it. And at the beginning of your turn, you're going to move all your workers forward 1. Now most of the time they'll have multiple paths, so you can pick which one you want to go to. On the village square, this one here lets you build another building. So you can start another building under construction, and then at the beginning of each turn, as you move each worker forward 1, when it gets to the end, you'll flip it over, and then you'll have a worker on this building. When you're moving workers, if a worker is on an action space, they simply go back to the beginning as that turn. So some turns your workers won't produce anything. And you can see here, this one gives you 4 deployment, while if I wait 2 turns, it can be 8 deployment. Now each of these buildings is going to do different things. I already mentioned this one here allows you to start a new building under construction. This allows you to train, which allows you to take 2, the number here 2, put 2 guys on your depot. This one here lets you deploy, so it can deploy 3 guys from your depot onto the board. This one's a better deployment, as it lets you deploy 4 and then 8. This one here is another one that lets you deploy 2 or convert someone else's meeple into one of your own. If you want to do better recruiting, you can build this building, which lets you recruit 2 and or 4. This catapult here can let you kill all the meeples in one space of an opponent, or you can simply basically launch a meeple into the building of somebody else's onto one of these spots here on that building. This one here lets you move forward another worker. It lets you discover new areas or recruiting. This lets you basically launch people onto the board or make your opponents run in fear or have some heavy recruiting. You can launch people on the board next to opponents or put them where you already have opponents. Here, when your workers if you're on this spot, when your workers get killed, then they will return to your depot rather than into your main pile. Or this is to recruit and to deploy. So which buildings are the best? Well, that's up to you to decide, because buildings will have different things, including hit points where enemies can move into them and destroy them, and you might build a good building that enemies will destroy. After players have moved their workers, they're then going to be able to move their meeples on the board. Each meeple can move one to adjacent spots. If you ever move to where other meeples are, then the meeples are removed one for one, remembering to give valor points, one for the attacker for each person killed, and one for each 2 people that the defenders kill. And so you're going to be moving around. You can even move off the board and explore and find new spots. These spots will sometimes have trees on them. You can't move through trees, although each player does start with one of these that they can use once per game to cancel out a tree area that they can move through. And sometimes they have special things on them. So this one here allows me to avoid trees. As long as I have 2 people on a spot, I can use the special activity of that spot. Like, for example, this one here gives a free recruitment each turn. And this one here is basically a sacrifice temple where you kill one of your troops to mess with the other player. There's certainly a lot of blank spots. This spot here gives me an extra deployment each turn. This one here gives me an extra on the attack. There are tunnels where you can go. You can tunnel out from here to a spot that's 2 away. There's a shield where as a defender you can ignore your first casualty. There's these mines where you can go from one mine to the other mine or one of the other mines on the board. And there's more of the spots that have victory points on them. So players are going to move all their workers, the white cubes on their building. Then they will they'll take the actions with those workers, if any. Then they will move all their meeples 1 square if they want to on the board. And then it goes to the next person. You just keep going around till one player gets enough points. That player is the winner. One of the things I enjoy about Meeple Wars is I think the theme is funny. I like the idea of the meeples, although I guess it kind of shows us, we already know the outcome. We know that blue won, since blue, the shape of the meeples, is the shape of the meeples in Carcassonne. I don't know if that means anything or not, but I did like that the different color meeples were also different shapes. That helps differentiate them on the board if people have different problem telling colors apart. The tiles and things were a little thinner than I would have preferred, but they work, and they're as a board basically moving around. Sometimes you have to kind of look a little closer at the board to figure out what does what, and you'll find yourself that which of especially when the buildings, this symbol means deploy, this symbol means train. You got to remember with the different symbols, but after you play it a little bit, you'll get it down. And I really enjoy how fast the game is. My first game when we played it, we were like, oh, let's do it again. You know, just that jumping into the next game. And I also appreciate that the game encourages attacking. A lot of games, I shouldn't say a lot, because nowadays it really is switching around, but many games in days gone by, the defender had the advantage. And why should I attack somebody? In this game, you get more valor points when you attack other people, so why wouldn't you attack? Getting those up there is one way to win the game. Finding a way, building tiles so you can get around to their buildings and move meeples in and take them out, that's a lot of points, and you don't get any points by just sitting around. I guess maybe you have the catapult, but even the catapult's going to be a really slow way to take out other players. Speaking of the catapult, seems like a very powerful building. That and the church, which lets you switch a meeple. Those do seem like the 2 most powerful buildings, but for a couple things. One, you build a powerful building like that, someone's going to try to take it out, especially somebody who puts all their effort into training and deploying meeples. And I like that the game has various strategies. It seems like all the buildings are very useful. Some might be better than others. I have a hard time telling. I mean, there's certain buildings that I prefer to others. But again, your building can be destroyed. Then you're like, well, whatever. I guess I'll build this building instead. I like the exploration factor of this. Kind of is a prequel to Carcassonne that way. Ooh, what tiles will we find? What things are we going to move around and find? Ooh, you know, controlling the board. But as you get more victory points, the meeples that you use to claim those victory points pulls more people off the board. So it's kind of a self-balancing function there. I enjoy the whole moving the workers along the track, so longer tracks will give you a better benefit, but you can only do those every 3 or 4 turns, while some activities you can do every other turn, they're just not as good. It's fast, it's easy, it looks good on the board, it has a different feel than pretty much any other game that I've played. It doesn't, yet it's about attacking and controlling territory, but it's also about like running your machinery as efficiently as possible and getting right up in the other person's face. Deterministic combat is not necessarily one of my favorite forms of combat, but here it works because it's fast, it's easy, and it keeps the game flowing. Players' turns are really quick, and they move around, and it's your turn before you know it. All this combined, it makes a small, nice package. Great artwork. Maybe could use a little bit of a component upgrade, but I'm pretty happy with it as is. That's Meeple War. Dice Tower Judgment, excellent.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!